as sports fans. And we're going to start with Get Up and Go, some of the big news around the world of sports. And actually, we have this just in to our newsroom. The International Olympic Committee has rescheduled the Tokyo Olympics for next summer. The opening ceremony is now set for July 23rd of 2021. Olympic officials have confirmed that all of the approximately 6,200 athletes who qualified this year will keep their spots for 2021. So chalk that up to doing the best you can in a bad situation. Elsewhere, good news from the NBA. Celtics guard Marcus Smart announced Sunday night on social media he has been cleared by the Massachusetts Department of Health. He had tested positive for COVID-19 2 weeks ago. Meanwhile, it was announced on Saturday that the owner of the Knicks and Rangers, James Dolan, tested positive for the coronavirus. In a statement, the Madison Square Garden company said the 64-year-old Dolan has been in self-isolation and is experiencing little to no symptoms. And then to the NFL, where Cam Newton remains arguably the biggest name left in free agency, along with Jameis Winston. For Newton, the question is if he's healthy. The 2015 MVP has tried to answer that by posting multiple videos of himself working out and throwing on Instagram. And it certainly seems that one possible landing spot for Cam Newton is in Los Angeles with the Chargers, which made this photo recently posted by Tyrod Taylor of the two quarterbacks working out together so interesting, because right now Taylor is atop the Chargers quarterback depth chart. And we will start this morning with Dan Graziano, our NFL insider extraordinaire. Dan, what can you tell us about Cam Newton's free agent status right this minute?
Well, right now it's still too early for anyone to know anything definitive about where Cam Newton might end up. He was just released at the end of last week. We know nobody wanted to trade for him, take on that $19 million salary, in addition to giving up draft picks, so he's freshly on the market. And it's a market where you can't bring in a free agent and examine him medically. And this is a player that missed almost all of last season with a foot injury, that had shoulder surgery 2 off seasons ago. So teams are going to want to see him. It could take a while before we find a place for Cam Newton to settle. The Chargers make a lot of sense. Obviously, they say they're all in on Tyrod Taylor for right now, but that doesn't mean they will be all summer. But it could take a while before someone can get Cam Newton into their building and examine him and decide whether it's worth taking a shot on signing him.
Yes, that's a point about the timing in all of this, and it takes us back to what Stephen A. Smith said on this show last week, that the Panthers, whether you agree or disagree with this notion, that the Panthers screwed him by waiting as long as they did to let him go, because all of these openings have pretty much since been filled. I also have with me this morning Dan Orlovsky and Marcus Spears. Delighted to see both of you guys there. We hope you had a great weekend. And Dan Orlovsky, I will start with you. As you listen to what Dan Graziano just told us, where do you feel like we stand right now with Cam Newton?
Yeah, Greeny, the NFL is sending Cam Newton and for the same reality, Jameis Winston, a very clear message that they do not see them. The NFL does not see them as week 1 starters this season. And that might be difficult for me to comprehend, and that might be difficult for you to comprehend and fans to comprehend. And it's probably difficult for Cam Newton to comprehend as well, but that doesn't matter. The reality is the NFL is sending Cam a very clear message that right now they don't see him as a week 1 starter, and that's hard for me to wrap my head around, the fact that a guy who was playing so well in 2018 is not viewed that way. But I think the reality is if the Chargers were going to make a move on Cam, it would have already happened, and he might have to wait till after the draft to see how many seats are left for him to go be a part of a team.
Marcus, let me ask you, and I'm going to ask you to guess here, but just to go back to what Stephen A. said about how the timing really was, in Stephen A.'s view, unfair to Cam based upon the totality of the circumstances. If Cam Newton had been released weeks ago, do you think an NFL team would have brought him in as their starting quarterback?
Absolutely. Gee, it's the physical. Listen, Cam, first of all, to find out if he's healthy or not, we've lamented over the fact that if Cam is healthy, he's a starter in this league somewhere because of what he's done in this league. And then you think about his ability to add to whatever you want to do offensively, especially if you want a guy that can move around. Cam's issue has been the shoulder and obviously the foot last year. But outside of that, it's just terrible timing, G. That's really what this boils down to for Cam Newton. Now, Jameis Winston, that's a different situation because that's the ability to keep the ball on your side of the field and not have turnovers. I firmly believe with Cam Newton, if he was able to go through the process that you usually go through as a free agent, to put yourself in position for teams to see you, lock in, understand the medical, see everything that's transpired from the time you had your surgery to now, someone would have him as a starter. And I think it would be the LA Chargers, because if they were so sold on Tyrod Taylor, the way Phillip Rivers played last year, Tyrod Taylor should have absolutely been in the game at some point during the season.
Yeah, Dan Orlovsky, I agree with all of that, to be honest with you. One way or another, it's about the health. And that's what's really hurting Cam here. Because to pick up on what Marcus just said, he's not a starting quarterback, Cam Newton, in the NFL, if healthy. He's an elite quarterback in the NFL. This is a guy who is to the point we have made repeatedly here. A year and a half ago, he was playing MVP caliber football. It's all about the medicals. And Orlovsky, we won't know this. Some team is going to have to, I would assume, fly blind and take a shot at this at very little money. And they may wind up striking gold.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is they've got to sit down with Cam Newton and figure out what his expectations are, Greeny, right? Like, is Cam looking for a 2-3 year deal worth $10+ million a year? Or is he willing to take a 1-year deal in a reasonable salary? I think everyone needs to understand, too, because when we talk about Cam Newton, one of the things that is often said is about the hits, right? And those are valid comments. But his injury was not from a being beat up type of thing or being worn down type of thing. It was a shot on his shoulder that would have happened to any other quarterback. And so I think that's important to point out that that injury was a freak injury, not one that was because of all the residual contact he's had over his years.
All right, let's wait and see where all of that nets out. It feels like it's going to be a little while before Cam Newton finds a home. Meanwhile, we have another story from the NFL. Playoff expansion appears to be right around the corner. This week, league owners are expected to vote on a proposal that would add one more team from each conference to the playoffs, increasing the field to 14 total. Again, there are currently 12 teams that make the playoffs, and it's been that way for 20 years. And this would add one team in either conference and mean that only one team in each conference would wind up getting a bye. Graziano, let me come back to you, because I think a lot of us believed that with the passing of the new CBA, this was baked in, that this was already done. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, it's actually not specified in the new CBA other than a reference to how the salary cap would be calculated in any season with expanded playoffs. But remember, the owners were supposed to be gathered with GMs and coaches right now in Palm Beach for their annual league meeting. That meeting was canceled a couple of weeks ago for the same reason everything else in sports has been canceled. But the owners are going to be having conference calls today and tomorrow to discuss some of the issues that would have been discussed and voted on at that meeting. And I expect either today or tomorrow, more likely tomorrow, that they will vote to expand the playoff field this year. They have to have some discussions about how that'll work, when the games would be played, which TV networks air them, etc. But I think there will be a vote taken today or tomorrow, most likely tomorrow, that results in an expanded playoff field by one team per conference as early as this season.
And let me quickly, before I turn it over to the fellas, go to you. How if we're going to go to 14, how far are we away, do you think, from a reality where we will eventually see 16, where there will be 8 teams in each conference and no byes in the playoffs?
Well, there are a lot of people that expect that to happen eventually, if for no other reason than the bye week teams have a strong advantage statistically in terms of who makes the Super Bowl, and now you have only one bye team per conference. If that advantage holds and no one other than the 1 seed can get to the Super Bowl in the next couple of years, you may see the league reevaluate and go to a further expanded playoffs where no one gets a bye. I think that's an expectation a lot of people have over the coming years.
All right, let me get the guys back in here. And Marcus, this time I will start with you. Do you like the idea of adding more teams to the playoffs?
I like the 14 teams. That 16-team one, I hate it. I feel like you earn a bye throughout the season. That's just the football player in me. But going back to this, adding one more game, I love the fact that they're doing this, and it's a possibility to have the playoffs start with a lower seed team and the one team having a bye week because teams get hot. Gee, we saw the Titans do it last year. We saw a 9-7 Giants team go on to beat the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl. The playoffs are about who's peaking at the right time. And all the time in sports, it really doesn't tell you based on a regular season who the best teams end up being when you get to that point in the playoffs. So I think it just makes it more exciting. I think teams that are 8-8, possibly going into that thing that's finally hitting their stride, can obviously get to the Super Bowl. I like the idea of it.
What do you think, Orlowski?
I don't like it, Greeny. Why don't we just have every team in the playoffs and we'll turn it into the Royal Rumble where everyone gets a shot. I've been on teams that were like fringe playoff teams, and if I'm just keeping it real, like I knew like if we got to the playoffs and we played as good as we possibly could and the team that we were playing didn't play well, we might get a win or something and advance to the next round. I think there's an unintended consequence here too. Like if we move to 14 teams getting into the playoffs, and to Graziano's point, there's only one team gaining the bye. People need to realize that the NFL regular season, Marcus, you know this, is a bloodbath. And even if you go, like, imagine the San Francisco 49ers going 14-2, and then the New Orleans Saints going 13-3. Neither was easy to get to.